All right, everybody, this is David Ortiz with Team Ortiz Live Hangouts. We're going to be talking gun safety today. I'm going to give everyone a few minutes, so please enjoy the smooth jazz sounds of Michael Hagen's Daybreak. Hey, this is David Ortiz. Who's got the big dog?
That's me.
Awesome.
She'll start barking as soon as we go live, or as soon as we start.
No worries, man. I mean, I miss big dogs. I've got two Chihuahuas. They're great wheelchair dogs, but
Yeah.
I miss big dogs.
Yeah.
I just rescued a Corgi Yorkie that turned into a German Shepherd.
Surprise!
All puppies look the same.
They all look the same at that age.
All right. Yeah, we have Melissa Garland joining us. She says hello.
Hey, Melissa. All right, I'm going to try doing that again, David.
Yep.
Let's see.
All right. We've got Lynn Perry joining us. She's excited to be here. She says, great to be here.
I got it.
All right. We've got John Blanco Lasada who's joining us. Says, hello, everybody. Thanks for doing this. All right. You know, we've got about 30 people joining us, so I think that's a good number to get started. My name is David Ortiz. I am running for the Colorado State House here in House District 38. We are. And I'm really, really humbled and excited to have this live hangout with Team Ortiz today. We're joined by a stellar panel to really discuss the importance of the work around gun safety legislation. So, you know, we're lucky enough as I say your first name, if you'll wave, and then we'll allow y'all to do your own individual intros. But we're joined here by Robin. She'll give a wave. All right, we're joined here by Connie. All right, we've got Senator Fields with us. All right, we've got Representative Sullivan joining us. And we've got Vic. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and let Senator Fields start us off.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you all this afternoon. I hope that you are safe and you're well at home. These are some really trying times right now. When I think about COVID-19 and how it has really rapidly transformed our lives, it's just hard to believe what has happened in a short period of time. In the state of Colorado, we have over 1,000 people who have lost their lives to this serious disease. And then nationwide, I think the last count is like over 82,000 people have lost their lives. So I want to thank you all for doing your part as it relates to staying at home, staying safer, and doing what's required to make sure that we're not spreading the virus, and we're trying to make sure that we bend that curve. I think that we are stronger together, and then we will get through this. But this conversation that we're having today is all about gun safety reform measures. I am a long-standing advocate as it relates to gun safety reform, it's because I'm a mother. I'm a mother, and I have survived the most horrific tragedy that you can ever imagine. I lost my son due to gun violence. My son was scheduled to be a key witness in a murder case, and there were 3 defendants that decided that they did not want him to advance his testimony. So they did a drive-by in the middle of the afternoon in a street in Aurora, and they shot him down, ambushed him alongside his fiancée. And so ever since that time, I wanted to make sure that I would lend a voice to survivors, to mothers, to families, to siblings, to our community, and those who create laws to make sure that we do some things to curb and ban gun violence. But I can tell you this work is work that cannot be done alone. It's work that requires everyone that's on this panel today in the community. Because of the work of so many, Colorado has some of the strongest and stiffest gun legislation across the nation. We have universal background checks. That means that you can't go to a gun show and buy a gun without making sure that you are eligible. You can't buy it from a private seller without making sure that you have passed a background check, as well as it goes to new guns. We've done some phenomenal work in the state of Colorado to curb gun violence, but there's still more work to be done. Because what has happened since the COVID-19 epidemic, this health crisis, is that people are buying more guns. They're buying more guns. I'm not quite sure why. So maybe someone in this panel can speak to that. But we're seeing an increase of purchases as it relates to guns. Also, we're seeing gun violence being used against African Americans. I'm quite sure you saw the 2 recent cases that came up in reference to an EMT worker where the police came in and shot her when she was at home in her bed in her underwear. And there was a no-knock raid.
Right.
And
Breonna Taylor, let's say her name.
Yes, Breonna. And she and the guy that they were looking for was already apprehended. And then we have another African-American male that was just jogging into, I don't know what you would want to call these folks, but they decided he was at the wrong place at the wrong time. So we have guns being used inappropriately. I support the First Amendment right, or the right to bear arms, but we have to make sure that we're responsible when we're using guns, and we can't be using them to take away someone's life, someone's promise, and someone's future. So what me and my colleague and many of you, when we're down at the Capitol, we try to make sure that we push legislation, advance legislation to protect our community from gun violence. So what we've been doing recently is there's some bills. I'm not quite sure if we're going to be able to move them forward. It's like, I think this is Tom's bill. He'll talk about it. Is safe storage. And there's other things that we can be doing. Right. We have bills that we passed where the sheriff's departments and others have decided we're not going to enforce them. Right. So we're passing laws, and there's some sheriffs and police organizations that are saying we're not even going to enforce it.
Yep.
So we have more work to do. I really appreciate having the opportunity to be on this panel. Of course, I'm open for any questions you might have, but I'm concerned about what's going on, especially as it relates to behavioral health, as it relates to school safety, and what we can do to make sure that we can resolve issues in our community without picking up a gun.
All right, Senator Fields, thank you.
Suicide or homicide.
Thank you so much. Thanks for that intro. Representative Sullivan.
Good afternoon, everyone. State Representative Tom Sullivan, House District 37. This is my first time trying one of these outdoors. So I hope everybody has already mowed their lawns and that, so we won't run into any of that. But if so, I'll dash inside. House District 37 is in Centennial. I'm in my backyard right now. I'm on the second year of my first 2-year term. I was the prime sponsor, co-prime sponsor of the Extreme Risk Protection Order that we got passed last year. It doesn't look like we also this year introduced a safe storage bill that the senator spoke about. I also introduced a lost and stolen firearms. Both of those bills were scheduled to be heard on the week of March the 14th. That happened to be the same week that we went into recess. So it doesn't look like they're going to get heard because of the pandemic that we are living through right now. But I've made it my mission to continue to talk about this to my colleagues, to my caucus members, while we deal with the pandemic of the COVID-19 virus. We are living in an epidemic of gun violence, not only here in our country, but here in the communities that we all live in. We still continue to have in excess of 100 people die by gun violence each and every day. 2/3 of that are suicides, and of that, 22 of those are our veterans. This
That's right.
happened every day before the pandemic was classified, and it's going to continue every day after we have a vaccine and start to get back to some type of normal. I've made a point to notate the first COVID death in the United States. They have designated as February 6th. It was in Northern California. Since that date, in the state of Colorado, we have had 62 gun deaths and 65 gun injuries and countless dozens of other injuries. Those continue to happen. Some of the highlights of ones that happened here this last week, we saw the one where a parolee got out early, and took him less than a week to get himself back in jail because he murdered a 21-year-old. Our suicides continue to go up. We had a young man who was 14 years old down in Colorado Springs who died by suicide with the use of a gun. You all saw the episode of a 7-year-old murdering his 3-year-old sister with a shotgun. And our domestic violence, murder suicides are on an uptick all during this time. That's why this is such an important issue. This is one that's with us every day, one that we can do something about, and it's incumbent upon us to do something about it, even while these situations are going on. There was a great article that Lee Patterson did from KUNC, the NPR station up in Greeley, talking about the number of gun situations in the city of Denver. I think it was up to 165 since the COVID situation came up. And what it's talking about is it's preventing our what we call the violence interrupters, the people who are the activists who get out in the community to help interrupt these problems. They are being hindered from continuing that kind of work because that's work that's done face to face, that's done person to person. It's not work that you can do on a telephone or through an email or even a chat like this. Although this is more helpful, it's not as well. Same thing is the situation that we live with after you've been affected, by the tragedy of gun violence. Those people are stopped from getting the victim advocates that work for our police departments and our city and county governments. Those people aren't able to come out and help the people. Those are situations that still go on each and every day, situations we need to continue to talk about. And I'm confident that with people like all of you who are on the call today, people who are listening, we certainly will continue to trumpet that cause and do something about it.
Rep Sullivan, thank you so much. Robin, if I could go ahead and have you go next.
Okay, hi. I'm Robin Horn. I have been a volunteer and GVP activist for the last 8.5 years. I lived in Connecticut at the time of the Sandy Hook shooting, about 30 minutes away from Newtown. And I grew up in Tennessee in a gun-owning, hunting family. So that incident and following the Aurora Theater shooting caused me to start to question what was going on. And so I got involved at that point. And I've worked with these guys on this panel here, Connie, Tom, and Centerfield, Rhonda. I met you guys, I think, in 2016. Yeah, so we've done a lot of good things here. By the way, I moved to Colorado at that time. The day I arrived here in Colorado, the next day was the Pulse shooting. So I firsthand saw Colorado kick into action at that point. And anyway, and Vic and David, Vic I've known for about a year, I think. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Yeah, and David, we've just kind of started to get to know each other. So thank you guys for inviting me to be part of this.
Great.
We got a lot of work to do, you know, and I think I mentioned I am a gun owner. There are a lot of myths we need to dispel about some of that piece of the issue. Most gun owners are they are safe. Like, what I'm trying to say is that safety is a big issue for them. But there is a small group out there that's very loud, and they don't represent the rest of us.
That's right.
So
Great.
Vic can speak to that too.
Great, Robin. Thank you so much. Connie, if I could have you go next, and then we'll follow up with Vic.
Absolutely. I am one of the daughters of teacher Dave Sanders, who was killed at Columbine High School 21 years and 26 days ago. And in the time since the shooting, I'm now a mental health provider, a forensic therapist specializing in working with people impacted by violence, with a specialty in people who have committed domestic violence. And the safer at home does not apply to everyone. Some people are not safer at home due to domestic violence, due to unsecured weapons. I am also a supporter of the Second Amendment. I believe in personal responsibility of gun owners, and some of the things that we're putting into place are really close to my heart. Working with the people in my field, we've had 3 suicides since the beginning of the pandemic, just with my clientele. And when I'm, looking at what we're facing right now, I've worked with veterans, I've worked with people getting out of prison, I have worked with people who are severely mentally ill. And we can make an impact if we work together. And I'm really excited to be a part of this panel because I really feel like we have an opportunity to make change. But with the number of guns that have been purchased since the beginning of the pandemic, there is a larger concern about responsibility, locking them up. The extreme risk protection bill was very important to me because, unlike a lot of people that have opinions about it, I see the people it actually impacts on both sides. So that's been really close to my heart. And I appreciate this opportunity to join with this great group of people to talk about such important topics.
Connie, thanks so much for sharing your story and sharing that. Vic, you want to finish us up with the intro?
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. The best for the last. My name is Vic. I am the president of the Colorado Gun Owners for Safety. We are a group of hunters, sports shooters, concealed carriers that each and every one of us believes in the Second Amendment, and we hold it dearly to us. But we also believe that the time is right for us to begin looking and having the conversation about sensible gun laws in this country. When you're losing more veterans to suicide than we have lost in the Vietnam War, I guess what I should have said was in the last 10 years, we've lost over 60,000 veterans to suicide, which is more than we've lost in all the KIAs of the Vietnam War, which something like that is hard for guys like Dave and I and others, everybody that's been a veteran. Not only that, seeing the amount of gun violence that's occurring in our nation, and our elected leaders in Washington are not able to do the right thing. It's a really tough environment that we are in the United States. So instead of being a couch critic, I decided to get up, create a foundation, create a group that have like-minded gun owners. We have 3 chapters, one in Colorado, one in Minnesota, and one Texas. We plan on going national. We were supposed to go national this year, but obviously COVID kind of disrupted that. We have members that are male, female, LGBT. We have minors from, I think the youngest person we have is a 16-year-old. And then we have age groups and that go and run the gamut. And we spend our time doing political outreach, social outreach, community outreach, and trying to help communicate that changing the gun laws is not an infringement on your Second Amendment right. And as a responsible gun owner, we have to be able to take the responsibility of gun ownership seriously, because of those incidents that are occurring out there, especially the negative ones and all the suicides, murders. It's going to shift the tide. And if we're not careful, gun owners that are responsible are going to feel, could feel the pain from that. So it's important that we sit and we have those conversations. Thank you, David. David, you're on mute.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much. Just a little critique here. I don't know if someone's tapping or typing, but if you guys can mute yourselves when you're not talking, if you plan on typing and whatnot. But great. So we actually do have a question. Before we get into our questions and start doing on that, I really want to let the audience know that we hear them and that they are seen. So let's start with the first question that we have from the audience. This is from Chris Hines. He is as far as I know, the first wheelchair user ever elected to a city council, does for District 10 for city council. He asks, do you think Canada's assault weapons ban will have any effect on the US? And then he says, thank you for all you do. So who wants to go ahead and field that first?
I think
don't jump in all at once.
Yeah, no, well, I think first of all, thank you. It's a great question. And, this is happening across the globe, where when we see nations that don't have an experience like we do in the United States, and they pass, we have a mass murder and they pass these assault bans, it's rightly so. Unfortunately, I think we're so polarized when it comes to the United States. We've had, the NRA's had a very powerful hold on the messaging that they have been giving for many, many years. And it goes back to that idea that the Second Amendment, honestly, I believe the NRA has bastardized the Second Amendment and what our rural forefathers really wanted to mean. So now we have this concept of this idea that, no, you can't make gun laws, because if you make gun laws, you're infringing on my rights. And until Washington is able to step up and work together on this matter, I don't see it's going to have a major effect to legislation in the United States, in my opinion.
Great, that's a good point. Anybody want to follow that up? I mean, I think it's true. There, for some reason, there's this attitude that you can't touch it, otherwise you're infringing my rights. And believe me, as someone that's sworn oath to the Constitution, as someone that sits in a wheelchair because of that oath to the Constitution, I take it seriously. And yeah, it talks about the Second Amendment, but it also talks about public safety, general welfare, and securing the blessings of liberty to our posterity and ourselves. And so, like, you can't yell bomb in an airport, right? Like, and there are people out there that try and says that infringes on their First Amendment rights, but it doesn't, because it attacks public safety. And it specifically says in the Constitution that is why we are, agreeing to this social contract, so that we can move forward to create one of, the safest, freest societies possible. I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in on that, but.
Yeah, David, only thing I would say on that, I mean, and as Vic said, the other countries have, done away with, assault weapons. We saw New Zealand do it. They, after their, mass shooting, prohibitions in the United States really doesn't work. We've seen that over the 240 plus years of our experiment that is going on right now. But I am confident, and what people need to be aware of is, although that we have more guns daily into our society, we have fewer gun owners. What's happening is there's a small group that is buying more and more and more. And that's really what the effect is. We are probably a generation or two away from where that number is. I mean, right now it's like 22% of the population own firearms. 78% don't own firearms. Okay, but the 22%, and they own 3 point, and probably since the pandemic, it's probably up to 3.8 million or 380 million, something like that, that they all own, and they're buying more. That's as we see the kids coming along, when grandpa and dad pass away, I foresee a time when those kids are going to show up somewhere with a table full of firearms and just saying, I don't want this stuff. This was grandpa's, and please, take this from me. So I think that's a perfect business opportunity for these people to figure out how to turn, firearms into gardening utensils or pieces of art. That's going to be the next boom here in our society.
And not to highlight VFW Post One, I am program director of VFW Post One. We do have artists and sculptors and welders. So for any of y'all out there that just heard that, there's your challenge. I got to give a shout out to Amy Patton, who's running for DA here in Arapahoe County. She said that's a great point, Tom. So you're bringing up really, anybody else want to follow that up? Or
I was just going to say that, it is time that we raise the bar on gun ownership in this country. The standard at which we are able to purchase a firearm really needs to be elevated, and it really needs to be looked at. To Tom's point, more guns are being purchased by gun owners, and a lot of those gun owners just are not responsible. There's not enough. If I want to drive a car, I have to go take a class, I have to get a license, and I have to learn how to drive that vehicle. In this country, anybody can go buy a firearm, and it doesn't matter. I've seen a lot of crazy things out there.
Vic, it's funny you bring that up, because we have, he was a Marine, so fellow veteran, Rafael Espinosa del Toro, that says, what about legislation to treat guns like cars? Everyone has a right to own a car. License and driving is a privilege. Registration, insurance required.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. As a veteran myself, I spent 20 years learning how to fire these weapon systems, and in order to be able to feel comfortable with it, we would have to go to the range once or twice a year just to be able to understand that, or and be able to use it. But in this country, you don't have to have a license. You don't have to have any training. You don't even have to go take an online course, even know what a firearm or a magazine or any of this stuff looks like. So we really need to elevate the idea of gun ownership.
Yeah, and I agree with all the comments that have been made. I do support that we should have registration and license as it relates to owning and operating a gun. I know that's a hard stretch and reach for some people to put their mind around that, but I think we have to be doing something differently. When we just had the question posed about what Canada has done, there's other states that have done some rapid response when they've seen mass murders, like in Australia. And then within a week or two, they've banned them. We've had some horrific mass murders situations in schools. We had Sandy Hook. What happened after that? We have Pulse. What happened after that? We've had the Aurora Theater shooting. And there's numerous other occasions that I can kind of point to mass shootings across the state, across our nation. And the result has been absolutely nothing, because the people that we have in Congress feel somewhat held hostage to the NRA and not wanting to do anything that might cost them some donations or contribution, but they're running the show back there as it relates to any movement, any reasonable legislation. They're not willing to do anything. And so when it comes to comparing ourselves with other nations and other countries, the only way we can do something different is to exercise your right to vote.
Well, can I add something to that?
Yeah, I want
Huh?
you to after you.
Yeah, so we
So
have to vote. We need to flip
yes,
the Senate. We
Right.
need to get new people in the White House, a new president in the White House. And we need to, move and advance legislation that's in the common good of what most people are saying across the nation. Most people are saying we want background checks. That isn't easy to do, but yet we can't seem to get that done in Congress. So the
Right.
best way moving forward is to stop looking at other countries. We can look at them as a model, but we need to make sure that we're all registered and we exercise our right to vote and vote for people who have similar values that we're all talking about today.
Senator Fields, thank you. Connie, if you want to follow that up.
yes. So I think one of the moments where I really, recognized the power of what we need to change was around the Columbine anniversary last year when a young woman flew here from Florida and they canceled schools across the metro area, thousands of kids. One person purchased one gun in our city, and an entire metro area of kids missed out on that day of education. And then she committed suicide with a weapon. And at what point are we, people were like, oh, thank goodness. And at what point are we saying, oh, thank goodness somebody committed suicide with a gun?
Mm-hmm.
And so if we treat the fear of people with weapons with the same respect as ownership of weapons, I think we'd have a big shift in our society.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you so
Good
much,
point.
Connie. Robin, if you want. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
To the point of voting and all of that too, is that we also look too at the stronghold that the gun lobby has on so many of our elected officials. And I think it's so important too for those who are wanting to see changes in gun laws to actively get involved with an organization, that is trying to make those changes. I had a conversation with an NRA member the other day, and for the first time, I mean, this guy's a hardcore guy, with the NRA, and he actually admitted that the stand your ground laws are too vague, and I thought, wow, at least, he's admitting that there's something out there that needs to be done. So anyway, yep.
I
No,
think the same common thing. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dave.
no, Vic, you go.
I was just saying, I think the same common thing is to get out the vote, right? So if you like the president, keep the president. If you don't like the president, vote against the president. But if you want to see true gun legislation occur at your state and where you're at and your municipality, you need to vote for those legislators that are the ones that are going to speak like-minded, just like David Ortiz. He's running for House. Sorry, I was going to give you a small little plug there, but I mean, supporting and endorsing guys like you at this level is important because you're going to help facilitate the change that can't happen in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and I mean, I gotta call attention to the two legislators that we have here. We need to keep supporting legislators like Senator Fields and Representative Sullivan. I mean, one of my first memories with Senator Fields was working on a bill together to try and crack down on the practices that private universities were taking advantage of people's tuition and their money with getting no return. And it ended up before the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. And we know that's the kill committee, but we both went down swinging anyway. So we need legislators that are making gains, but are not afraid to stick by their values and to go down swinging. Same thing with Rep. Sullivan. I mean, he's been one of the most genuine legislators that I've had the privilege of interacting with, because you know what he's about. You know what he's about. He makes it known every day of his life. And so we need to keep supporting legislators like that, Vic. You're dead right. And to go off of Connie and Robin's point, it does not necessarily have to be a bipartisan issue. I mean, right before the shutdown in a time of COVID, we had Sheriff Spurlock, our neighbor to the south, who's a Republican, talk about statistically and anecdotally how the red flag bill is saving lives. How the red flag bill is saving lives. So this does not have to be a bipartisan issue at all. And we actually do better when we work together, especially if we're going to be going after that low-hanging fruit to make our community safer.
Right.
I have felt very encouraged recently. I have a wide network of people from all sides that I'm really impressed. I think that we are in that time shift of change where people are starting to think more about themselves and less about being partisan about these issues, that at the end of it, none of us want to die. And so I think everybody is trying to find that common ground. And I've seen a big shift in some of my friends on the Republican side, that they are starting to see that maybe, being so extreme isn't the right answer to save their own families and their own communities.
Okay, so I just want to throw this question out there next. We got some loose talking points here. So, what are the differences that we see between gun violence in our suburban areas versus urban areas? How do we see the differences in gun violence, how it impacts the communities of color versus not? So what are the differences, but also how can we still recognize those differences and work collaboratively together to make sure that we are supporting each other and moving forward and saving lives?
I guess I'll take that on, because gun violence has plagued communities of color for a long time. So way before there were like mass shootings and there became this attention on school shooting and those kinds of things, there was this issue with guns in communities of color as it relates to handguns. So it's been a long-standing problem, which I consider, gun violence as really as a health crisis in reference to how guns are used for a variety of different reasons in my community, in the suburbs community, in rural community. But the difference is when you see it happen like in a suburban or a rural community, it's based on oftentimes someone feeling somewhat isolated, someone disconnected, someone that has been bullied to a sense, someone that takes some extreme measures to commit homicide and suicide at the same time. That seems to be different than what you see in communities of color. The use of handguns really doesn't make any sense in reference to why anyone would use a gun to harm someone else. But the reasons sometimes and the rationales are different. And I think we can't solely identify legislation as a way to repair and address gun violence. It is a whole community approach. It is a whole state approach. No matter what zip code you live in, our businesses need to be involved with it. Our schools need to be involved with it. Our church, our faith communities, our mental health people need to be involved. And when we see someone that's troubled, or if we see someone that is depressed, or they're having issues, then we need to make sure that we look that person in the eye. If we're capable of doing that, if we see somebody that's struggling, then we need to intervene at any level that we can to address the situation so they're not acting out their issues that impact others. So we know in some situation, many of these folks that are in mass shootings, someone knew that something was going on with them, but someone decided not to share it with anybody. They just let these folks exist without intervening, where we could probably save lives. So we need to see something and we need to say something. But that's how I kind of see the difference as it relates to maybe a suburban situation and an urban situation. In urban settings, they over police people of color.
Amen.
We have, those red lights stop, they're in communities of color. They over police our communities. And in rural or suburban communities, they're not probably looking for the same type of issues that they constantly focus on as it relates to communities of color. So there are differences. We need to be aware of those disparities. We need to be aware of the racial discrepancies that exist in policing, what's going on in our schools and our neighborhoods, and create environments where people can make better wages so they're not feeling so panicked and stressed that they need to do harm to other people. And
Right.
we just need greater equity.
Outstanding. Anybody want to follow that?
Oh. Robin, you're muted.
Yeah. It reminds me too that there are certain needs for certain areas. When you look out, that Colorado has a high rate of suicide, and Connie could probably speak to this better than I can. But with volunteer work that I've done, that's what we see sometimes, is that there's, on the western slope, there's a lot of gun owners, and it's just different in some areas, and so they all need to be addressed. You want to add anything to that, Connie?
I do. Thank you, Robin. So Colorado has always been kind of a hotbed for violence. When you look at Columbine, Aurora Theater, Chuck E. Cheese, Planned Parenthood. I mean, we could just go down the list. The STEM shooting. I mean, but even taking those out of it, we've got a really high rate of murder suicide. We've got a really high rate of suicide by itself, a really high rate of accidental shootings. I do agree that there are different needs in different areas. And I can also hear some of the arguments about, rural communities where police to get to the scene of a shooting could be 20 or 30 minutes away.
Mhm.
So how do we address that within that community? They may need different resources or different allowances for firearms and weapons than in urban areas where we can get professional assistance very quickly from our first responders. And so there is a discussion about how this looks for each community. And there is so much disparity. I work with people that are coming out of the criminal justice system. And when I look at the charges and the convictions and the differences between different people of color, it's astounding. And so we have a lot of work to do. And a lot of that work involves common sense gun safety legislation. How can we make our communities safer for everyone?
Yeah, just to follow up on your comment, we've got Lynn Perry who's watching with us. It says poverty and lack of access to mental health care are also drivers. It is easier and cheaper to buy a gun than access mental health ID. You are depressed, angry, etc. So and this goes to one of the things, like when I talk about securing the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity, like the one liner that I go to is I want to make sure that we secure the blessings of liberty so that my neighbor, whether they're a veteran or a civilian, has easier access and can turn to mental health care easier than they can to a firearm to end it all, because that's a permanent solution that happens so quick and impacts so many. So thank you, Lynn, for making that comment. I really do appreciate that.
Can I
you want to
chime
follow
in
up?
on that real quick?
Yeah.
So if we were to see something positive from this pandemic, it is so easy to access care. And I mean, I went from having a 15% non-attendance rate for court-ordered treatment to a 3%. So the things that we're learning about online mental health care, it's amazing. Yeah. We've got people accessing care like we never have before. So that's encouraging. I was discouraged to see that some of the budget cuts are going to be aimed at mental health care in Colorado. We rank near the bottom in the United States for mental health care funding. And the only time that we get a boost in funding is after a mass shooting. So, keeping those things in mind.
Thank you for that.
Well, that's good to hear, Connie, because there's always, especially the veterans, veterans find themselves in very dark places, and they don't really ask for help all the time. So it's good, especially when they're experiencing that mental crisis, that there's more access for mental health.
Right.
That's great to hear.
They can do it from the safety of their home via platforms like this, to where it used to be they had to go out in public, they had to go to the VA, they had to make an appointment. And as a mental health provider, I'm really proud of my colleagues and my profession for jumping in head first and saying, okay, we can do this.
Outstanding. Anybody else want?
Well, you have to remember in those situations, they can have the access, but they actually have to have the bandwidth in which to do it. We don't have enough people who are connected to the internet, to Wi-Fi, to be able to do that. Just had a meeting the other day with Superintendent of Cherry Creek Schools, talking about that they had given 7,000 laptops to kids so that they continue their schoolwork, is allowing them to hang on to that, has bought another 10,000 more of those. I mean, if we think it's important enough to make sure that our fans at the Bronco game have Wi-Fi while they're watching the Broncos and send trucks there that amplify that, why can't we do that in the neighborhoods, especially in urban neighborhoods where these kids are trying to get education? And in the cases here, you're talking about access to mental health and conversation, which is, we know that's what helps saves lives.
Amen. Senator Fields, did you want to chime in too?
I just want to talk about this whole access as it relates to behavioral health, because there's been some progress made as it relates to trying to reduce the stigma that's associated with mental health. it wasn't until the passing of Obamacare, healthcare, that now mental health and behavioral health can be treated and can be billed. Because before it was set up, you had to have your own money outside of your insurance network to seek counseling and treatment.
Mm-hmm.
So over the course of Obamacare, now we have been able to try to reduce the stigma that's associated with behavioral health. And now we have behavioral health counselors and social workers and others that can be paid for their services under their insurance.
Yeah.
But, and this is like a recent phenomenon. I just passed a bill this session to say that kids can be excused for an absence because of behavioral health. Because before then, the only way you could have an excused absent was when it was a physical illness. So we're still trying to work through some of the wording and the stigma that's associated. It's not good to be sad, and you can't come to school if you're sad. So we are making incremental changes, but I agree with the question or the thought that it is sometimes easier to get a gun than to seek treatment. And a lot of it is access or even not knowing where to go. But we do have telehealth now, which is really addressing this whole issue to expand access. But still, there's a disconnect in getting people to the point to know where to go to get those resources to address some of the concerns and issues that they're having. But I believe in behavioral health. I believe in mental health. And if anybody has issues, I encourage anyone to talk to somebody if you're having trouble. We do have a hotline that's available across the state. And as it relates to COVID, we do have 211. So if anyone's experiencing issues with food insecurity, rent assistance, water bill, the state has implemented a 1-800 number, was 211. You can find it on the Gov's page, and you can get access to resources for behavioral health, mental health crisis, and then also with COVID related issues.
Thank you for saying that. We besides access, because access isn't equal among communities. We also have to recognize, and I'm just going to speak as a Latinx or as a Latino, the way that culture plays into the way that we perceive or view a stigma around mental health. I know growing up for me, it was, well, you have priests to talk to, you have your parents to talk to. That's all you should need. What are you talking about? What is this? And then compound to that being in the military, where it's like, especially as a pilot, the instant you show an inkling of that going on, you're grounded. That's it. You're not flying anymore. And I know it impacts the community of color as well. I mean, we got the great Leanne Wheeler who made a comment, by the way, Black children also feel isolated and depressed and suffer mental illness. And I want to go back to one of her other comments, and then we'll go to another crowd question, which she says, it's not that there are no issues in affluent areas. There absolutely are. Senator Fields is right. Lesser affluent neighborhoods are over-policed. I'm in the wealthiest ward in Aurora, where hanging out at Sonic, smoking pot, and blaring music is clearly handled differently than Sonic and lesser affluent areas. So something to consider. I want to go to a question now from John Blanco Lasada. Connie mentioned the Florida girl who came to Colorado to purchase a gun. Should we raise the age to purchase a shotgun or rifle to 21 to be the same as the school to purchase a handgun to inhibit the ability of high school seniors to access weapons? Anybody?
I feel like I think, my opinion is yes. However, I also want to recognize, the differences in sport hunting with your family. I understand that's a different thing. But as far as purchasing, we're talking the word purchase. Yes. She was 18 years old from out of state with some very clear mental health conditions, and so that in itself was a fairly unique case. But I think it's a tricky question. But I know myself at age 21 was far different than me at age 16. Vic, do you have anything on that?
Oh yeah, tons. Yeah, absolutely. And right before this all started, David and I were talking about, and I kind of agree with what David said. Us being in the military, we can go off to war, and we're expected to be able to utilize a firearm and a weapon system to defend this country. But that's completely different than having someone that is unexperienced and has be able to go buy their first firearm without ever touching one. Do I feel that we should raise the firearm purchasing age in Colorado 21? Absolutely. I absolutely do. And to your point, responsible gun owners, hunters, sports shooters, the family members that do that, I will buy my son a firearm, and he's allowed to utilize that in a confined or controlled situation where we're enjoying the sportsmanship or the sport that we like to utilize in firearms. So my son, if he's 18 and him and I like to continue to hunt and I buy him a firearm, there's no law saying he can't have it. It's simply saying that at that age, you're not able to purchase it yet. I'm fine with that.
Great. Just to not to derail this discussion too, just want to make sure we get to everyone's comments. So we got Lynn Perry that says not just telehealth, which by the way, HHS says is temporary. It is coverage at a time when people are losing their employer coverage healthcare. Medicaid is running out of funding. Elect all these people who can address these complicated issues. Vida, an activist in the community, waves hello to all of y'all. So, and then we've got Wolf that's watching on YouTube that says, I'm a veteran who believes that military grade weapons, including the popular AR-15 and AK-47 should not be owned by the average citizen and only by registered collectors registered with the ATF. And then finally, we'll finish with a comment from Leanne Wheeler again. It is largely misunderstood that all veterans qualify for health care through the VA healthcare system. Where this gets missed on the federal level, states can come alongside and support. So, man, and then one final one from Melissa Garland. I think confined, controlled situations is the key for what you said, Vic. So we got some great people that are wishing y'all well, that are making comments and asking the right questions. Before we get into closing thoughts at this time, I want to move it into a lightning round. And I think part of the reason why I host these is so that those in the community can get to know you a little bit, either so they can see themselves in you, or they just, in getting to know you, obviously just understanding that you're just like them. You're just a person that is passionate about the issues and that is doing the work in one way or another, whether you're serving as an elected leader or not. So with that, keep these answers to either one words, either yes or no's, or just answer the question if you can, please. So let's start with a fan favorite. Who is your favorite president?
Obama.
Obama.
What was the question?
Well, who is your favorite president?
Oh, that's an easy one for me. President Barack Obama.
I'm Irish Catholic. It would be Kennedy.
JFK. Thank you. I agree. JFK's mine as well.
I'm going to go with, I've said this before, FDR, the wheelchair president. So got to go with that.
Go.
All right.
I liked him too a lot.
Let's move on to the next one. And does pineapple belong on pizza? I'm a resounding no.
Yes.
No.
Someone else's.
Sauerkraut. Yeah.
Oh.
No, I hate sauerkraut pizza. It's disgusting. Sorry for whoever likes it. Oh.
All right. Let's take this to a question that I custom tailored for those of us on the panel. First of all, tell me who your favorite comic book hero is and why, and are you a DC or Marvel Universe person? So
I
who
was
wants
a
to
Mad
start us?
Magazine person.
Mad Magazine.
I mean,
All right.
I don't even know about DC.
I don't either. So I'd say Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Oh,
There
there
you
you
go.
go. Superwoman for
Exactly.
sure.
Amen.
May she live forever.
It's been such a long time since I've laid my hands or read a comic book. But when I was a young girl, I used to read Archie. What was Archie's girlfriend's name?
Veronica. Wasn't it
You
Veronica?
guys don't remember?
Betty.
Yeah, Veronica, right? Or Betty? Was it
Yes,
Betty?
Archie
Betty?
and Veronica.
Okay.
And they're not superheroes, but that's what I was into.
Right.
All right.
I'm a Spider-Man guy and Marvel all the way.
All right. Vic?
And not really a superhero, but a comic book with Sergeant Rock. I love that comic book, and that was DC. Yeah, that was my favorite.
All right. For me, I got to say it's evolved. When I was a leg walker and back in my younger days, Wolverine was always the favorite. Now in my more mature age and being a wheelchair user, I got to say Professor X, and I'm definitely a Marvel.
Oh, there you
Definitely a
go.
Marvel. So, all right. And this one can be discussion too, because this is always a popular one. Favorite book and why?
Weird Colorado, because it highlights what's unique about Colorado and how important we all are to each other in all of our weird activities.
All right. Who's next? Weird Colorado. Like it.
It's Your Ship by Captain Abrash. It's a Navy captain that wrote a book about leadership, and he's written several books. But essentially, it's about empowerment of your people and letting the people take control and not always looking at one leader to do everything. So it's a pretty good book.
I don't know. I think my favorites are whatever ones I'm reading right now, and I'm reading called The Way of King. It's one of these fantasy epic 10-volume stories, and the first book is like 12 pages, and I'm about 3/4 of the way through it. So I'm having a lot of fun with that one.
All right.
And my favorite book is called The Alchemist. And basically it's a book about a journey in life and finding your own calling and passion.
I love that answer just personally, and here's why. Because the first time I tried to read that book, I was studying abroad in South America. Spanish was my first language, but back in the 80s, there was a lot of prejudice against my parents saying you're going to affect his SAT scores, ACT scores, and we know that's the opposite now. So going to study abroad was kind of me trying to regain that language and that culture, and I tried to read it in Spanish, and it took me an hour to read 5 pages. So I put it down. After my 6 months, I went back to reading it again, and was up to normal reading speed. And the thing that I love about it too is it is a journey. You're right, and how some setbacks actually contributed to the main character getting to his personal legend or his life story. It's kind of what the purpose of the book is. So if y'all haven't read that, I also recommend that. Mine is Once an Eagle. I've mentioned it before. The long story short is it kind of has 2 archetypes of leadership. One that went through West Point, which is the Academy for the Army. One that went enlisted because he didn't want to wait to get a commission. One individual that was about his career more than anything else, and about pleasing the people above him because he was about his career. And the other that was about his subordinates. And it follows their journey from, I want to say, pre-World War I even, and it culminates in the Pacific campaign of World War II, and it ends in the Vietnam campaign. So very impactful book for me. Definitely a great answer. We'll get back to questions here. The first thing I want to give is Rep. Sullivan the opportunity to talk to 2 specific bills that he has going on right now. I know you mentioned them earlier, but if you wanted to finish talking about them and kind of what we can expect to see, if we can expect to, or you need us to support them through the end of this extended session, or what the plan is moving forward.
If you're talking about the lost and stolen and the storage, I don't have a definitive answer for you. I mean, I thought they were very important bills. They would have been, we would have been well served to have them presented at the beginning of the session. That didn't happen. I enjoy listening to Vic talk, and I don't hear very many of them talk about it. When we talk about law abiding, we also need to make sure that they're responsible. And I think that's what the importance is of both of those types of bills, is to make people responsible for what they're doing. I don't have a definitive whether those are going to be moving forward for the remaining couple of weeks of our session, but I can just guarantee you that should I get reelected this upcoming election, that would be something, and I'll be better prepared to bring it forward at the very beginning of session, so that it gets its chance. We get to have a conversation about it, and we can start getting way to saving more lives.
Yeah,
great. And if you guys,
I was saying, in preparation of that bill, Colorado Gun Owners for Safety had expected, obviously we didn't think coronavirus was going to come. So at the end of December last year, we attended the Sportsman Expo and handed out 750 gun locks to anybody that wanted one. And we didn't talk about politics. It wasn't anything about that. It was simply, hey, if you own a firearm, here's a gun lock. Please take the opportunity to lock it up, especially if you have children at the house or in your house or grandkids. So thank you, Tom, for everything you're doing. And we'll continue to support you with actions like that until we can get a safe storage bill out there in the hands of the community.
outstanding. Senator Fields, is there anything that you want us to look out for and be ready for?
Yeah, I think just be on the lookout for the hard work that we have ahead of us. And when we go back to the Capitol, which is going to be May 26th, we're looking at a $3.3 billion shortfall in revenue. So I'm asking everyone that's listening and those who are on this panel to be patient with us, because we're going to have to make some very severe and deep budget cuts. So all of the pet projects or all the things that are important to us at this point, all of that is up for consideration. But when it comes down to it, what we have to do, what we're required to do, is to balance the budget. By our Constitution, we have to balance the budget, and we also have to fund our schools and all of our government agencies. There is a lot at stake as it relates to all the programs that we rely on. Someone mentioned Medicaid and Medicare, and how we protect kids in our schools. You know, our per pupil funding is at risk. And schools get funded by how many students that are in those schools. And there's some schools, some kids are going to be missing. You know, with this gap we have, I'm concerned if some students may not show up, and that could impact funding. So at this point, I think when we come back, our focus is going to be very, very targeted and very strategic as it relates to the COVID-19 crisis, as it deals with workers' compensation, employment, housing, our funding of all the other government agencies, and some of these other ideas that we had, like 530 bills. We're only going to be back for 3 weeks. And we have the dynamics that politics play in it, the gamesmanship. We just don't have a lot of time with the critical work that needs to be done. So I would just ask, be patient. We're going to, at the end of the day, we will pass a budget and we will have a sine die. And the sine die means the session is over. And we won't have an extended session. We're going to get the work done.
Yeah. And let me add context to that too, just because look, and this, I'm going to speak to my personal philosophy a little bit. The federal government needs to be stepping in and supporting states. That is, yes. I mean, when our founding fathers got together and organized, yeah, we wanted states to have liberty and free reign on how to govern their own citizens. But in times of emergency, in times when this country needs to rally together, that is exactly the purpose of the federal government. You don't go into and the tools like deficit spending, you don't go into deficit spending to give tax cuts to the wealthy. That's not what it's for. What it's for is for times like now, when states have a $3.3 billion shortfall and we need funding. And I don't know if we're going to be able to outcut our way out of everything. I just want to make sure that everyone out there that's listening, that their frustrations are well placed, because our current legislators are going to have to make the tough decisions. And like, I've already seen it, because look, as a person living with a disability, we are always the last ones considered. That's why the state capitol is not even fully accessible. But you better believe that our programs are the first one on the chopping block when it comes to those living with developmental disabilities, for example. But here's the thing too, like if it's a choice between that and like kids going without healthcare, obviously I don't want kids going without healthcare. There are difficult decisions ahead, and we need to make sure that we're not tearing each other apart, that we're really working collaboratively and together, and making sure we place the frustration at the feet of where it belongs. Something else that I want to dispel too that's going out there a lot are these flyovers. I am so tired of people that have not one iota of experience with the military expressing their frustration at service members, being like, well, why can't we get PPE when they're doing flyovers? Guess what? As a pilot, we need to stay current with federal aviation regulations and combat ready to do our job. We're out there flying and training anyways. Every American wants to feel like they're doing their small part in some way. And if they're giving you a free air show as well as doing this training, guess what? As a taxpayer, you're getting more bang for the buck. So we need to make sure that we're working collaboratively and not be misplacing anger and frustration during all this, because that's all that's going to do is separate us and divide us in a time when we need to be more unified and together. So, I mean, I wanted to piggyback off the fact that you were saying, like, Senator Fields, work with us, be patient with us. It's going to be tough. $3.3 billion is nothing to sneeze at. That is huge. And the fact that we don't have a collaborative and cooperative response coming from the federal government is also huge. So I just want to make sure we say that. Today is Armed Forces Day. So for those of you that are still wearing the uniform, you know, I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't say thank you for what you do, even during a time of all this. So it's your day today. I want to make sure we call attention to that. At this time, I'm going to go round robin. If anybody has any last thoughts or any last words they'd like to offer before we sign off here. Robin, you want to start us off, because you're first on my screen?
I think that what we're all doing is so incredibly important here around the gun violence prevention issues. And thank you all for everything that you are doing Like I said, I've worked with some of you before and look forward to continuing the work that we're doing here in Colorado. And we have a lot of work to do. Out to everyone else out there that's listening, if you're not involved with an organization, get involved because it's a good way to make your voice heard. And if you're serious about changing the, the people whose lives are cut short by gun violence every day, get involved. Call your senators, call your representatives, go to the Capitol, sit through the hearings, let your legislators know that you're supporting the work that they're doing. And anyway, so looking forward to seeing these changes happen.
Thanks, Robin. Connie?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, I just think I appreciate you bringing us all together for this. I think that, coming together and sharing ideas and opinions and information about these topics is so crucial. One of the things that really hits home with me as a treatment provider is that stigma around mental illness. And I would like to bring up the term that I have been trying to get out there, and that's mental injury. That, we have mental injuries and those can be worked on. When you have an injury to your foot, you don't live the rest of your life with broken foot disease. So, people don't want to identify with having an illness that's going to be forever. Most of them are not. Trauma is an injury. And so it's okay to get treated for an injury. It's okay to get treated for an illness. And I agree with Vic. I don't care who you vote for, but get out there and vote, because sitting behind your computer and having an opinion is not helpful for our country. We need to come out and, really show what we believe in and support our legislators that we believe in.
Yeah, thank you, Connie. I agree with Connie and Robin. Hey, if you're a gun owner, you've got a family member that's a gun owner, they believe in the Second Amendment, and they also believe that there should be sensible gun ownership, have them come out and reach out to us. They'll be interested in finding out that there is a community out here that might speak for you versus an organization like the NRA may not always speak to what you believe in, but there is a moderate group out there of gun owners that are trying to do the right thing and also protect our sport. Thank you.
Outstanding. Senator Fields?
Yes, I just want to say thanks everyone for staying engaged and staying plugged in. During this time, do everything that you can to keep yourself safe, keep your family safe, be kind, and let's take care of each other.
Outstanding. And Representative Sullivan?
Yeah, thank you, David, and thank you all the rest of you for allowing me to join in with you on this. Thanks to everybody who spent some time today to ask questions and to hear what we had to say. These are very important times. Now's your time to get yourself educated on some of these subjects. Dive in, read about it, ask the questions, and get yourself prepared for when we come out of this, because there's going to be a lot of work for all of us to do, and we're going to need all of your help.
Great. I'm going to take this opportunity then to say there are amazing organizations out there, whether we're talking about moms, gun owners, Everytown, that are trying to move the needle outside of our federal and state capitals, and support the work of our elected leaders like Representative Tom Sullivan, like Senator Rhonda Fields. Here's the thing, though. It takes money to do this. So, and Tom Sullivan's made this ask for me. I'm making this ask for him right now. It does take money to do this. We have to be able to pay our staff. We have to be able to reach voters. So there's his website. If you want to follow him on his social media, there it is as well. I'm going to do the same for Senator Fields here. So please, 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 please support legislators that are going to be supporting our shared values and making sure we can continue to make our communities safer, making sure that we reward and promote responsible gun ownerships, and please support these organizations as we can. So again, thank you all so much for being here. This was a stellar panel. I mean, we went over an hour. We never go over an hour. So thank you all so much. There were so many issues that we had to talk about. And for myself, my name is David Ortiz. I am running for the Colorado State House here in HD 38. I'm going to go ahead and make that ask for myself as well. We are in a primary here, but we're doing extremely well. We've been endorsed by 23 now, by adding Senator Fields today, 23 now currently serving elected Democrats. And we have fundraised close to $50K. Money isn't everything, but it matters. We have an amazing team of interns. Our average age of our phone banker is probably 20 years old because a lot of high school kids and college kids are doing all of their classes virtually. So if you get a call from our campaign, please, please, please be nice to them. I know I was playing video games when I was 17. And so when you have 17, 18, 19-year-olds calling you, please be cordial. So, but they're making sure we get our shared values represented. Together, working together, I know we can flip this seat, making sure we get our shared values. I look forward to working with you, Senator Fields, and you, Representative.
I think I just lost him.
Yep, we did.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't hear any.
Oh,
I love you guys. You're amazing. All
Thanks,
of you.
Thank you
everybody.
guys so much.
Tom,
Yep.
tell Terry hi.
thank you.
All right.
Good to see you all.
Bye, everybody.